So the 30th anniversary event begins tomorrow. And like all big expansions, we like to really just narrow down to some of the major changes that are coming if you happen to miss the previous TWAPs. Now granted, this is not exactly an expansion or even a new season, but it is sizable in regards to sandbox changes, as everything that you're going to be seeing will essentially be the foundation leading up to Witch Queen. So without further ado, guys, let's list these mega big changes coming tomorrow. Starting with number 1, the 30th anniversary is bringing none other than Gjallarhorn back. Now, it's not just Gjallarhorn that's returning, although that is a big one, but also a new dungeon, which will be accessible via the old loot cave, as well as a new 6-player activity, which we've already seen some screenshots of, which will include weapons like Ias Luna, 1,000-yard stare, and even potentially some Halo-themed weapons. The battle rifle, there's some rumors of the Magnum. We even got a very fuzzy screenshot of the Matador 64. So even though, yes, this is not a new season, the amount of things that are about to be dropping on us is definitely in line with what a new season would be bringing. From all the various different weapons that we're getting, the different armor sets, and the inspirations behind them, being both Halo and Bungie inspired, loot-wise, things are looking pretty jam-packed. All of this will be obtainable either through the new dungeon or the new 6-player activity, Dares of Eternity. Now let's get into sandbox changes, starting with change number 2. Fellas, we have some major weapon archetype changes that includes some nerfs, but a lot of big buffs. Starting with shotguns, which are actually going to be getting a PvE damage nerf, but pellet shotguns are actually getting a 10% PvE damage buff. Linear fusion rifles, despite them being extremely meta right now, are actually getting a PvE damage buff by 10%, meaning they're going to be super meta. Caster swords are also going to be more ammo efficient. Bows are also getting an increase in damage by 10% against rank and file enemies. And sidearms and fusion rifles are finally going to be hit scan weapons regardless of the frame rate, meaning both your sidearm and your fusion rifle should be hitting the target with more ease. Long story short, guys, these are some major sandbox changes that are coming that are sweeping archetype changes, and we're going to even get more information tomorrow with these sandbox patch notes. Now, change number 3. This actually includes a long list of exotics that are getting a buff, as well as some nerfs. This includes Vex Mythoclast, which is actually getting a reduction there in its aim assist value, and now will require 3 eliminations to fully overcharge instead of 2. Fighting Lion now remove the multi-hit requirement to proc the buff and increase the buff reload stat from +50 to +70, as well as the duration to 7 seconds. Arbalest will now have intrinsically anti-barrier, which is fantastic considering that Arbalest has disruption break. It's going to be a meta option for sure. And Sleeper Simulant had his magazine size increased from 3 to 4, as well as PvE damage increased by 6%. Soros, in its focus fire dual mode receiver, will now have +30 range as well as +3 zoom. This bad baby is practically going to be a scout rifle. Cryosthesia has had a variety of changes that essentially is going to make the weapon and its charge shot have an AoE effect that will freeze combatants and slow players. Long story short, in between its variable trigger function, its AoE effect, Cryosthesia is looking to be much easier to use, and that exotic perk much easier to take advantage of. Leviathan's Breath and its catalyst will now grant you Archer's Tempo, meaning its overall DPS should substantially increase. But if we're going to talk about DPS, the king has actually returned. That's Whisper of the Worm. There's now going to be a reduction in its delay on activating Whispered Breathing, and its exotic catalyst used to be 2.1 seconds, will now be only 1.2 seconds. White Nail also will have its magazine refill change, was pulling 3 from inventory, but will now simply pull 2 from inventory and 1 from thin air. Oh, and it's getting an increase in damage inside of PvE by 10%. Darcy got an overall reduction in flinch, recoil, as well as accuracy degradation by 50% while personal assistant is active. And if you were concerned if Darcy would be meta inside of PvE, it's actually getting a 20% buff in its damage inside of PvE. Malfeasance. Fellas, if there was ever a time to be using Malfeasance, now is it. With the combination of Lucky Pants and the buff that was handed out to that exotic, Malfeasance is a meta, and I mean a meta option, especially against taken enemies. It's actually getting an increase in its explosion damage by 50%. Deadman's Tail, known to be only a mouse and keyboard weapon, is actually going to be getting less recoil, improved accuracy, as well as increased reticle friction fall off for controller players. Now, Bungie did highlight that this will be a reduced effect for mouse and keyboard players, but fellas, let's be real, it's still going to be a buff. How noticeable? We'll know tomorrow. Heir Apparent Catalyst reduced damage resistance against players from 75% to 25%. Yes, it was a little too hot, a little too strong. Bungie's dealing with that one. Lord Once Driver removed ability energy regeneration on picking up that telemetry. I know, so many people were expecting a bigger nerf. No, Traveler's Chosen will now grant you 10% ability energy per stack on activation. They also reduced the stacks granted on Guardian defeats from 3 to 2. Now, I still think Traveler's Chosen is going to be fantastic due to the dynamic cooldowns of our abilities. Regardless, this is just a small peek at the exotic changes that are going to be coming this week. Taking us to change number 3, we have a lot of changes coming to weapon perks. Some that used to be meta options for you, some not so much. One of them being Adrenaline Junkie. Talked about Adrenaline Junkie in our Judgment review, but eliminations with a weapon will now add a single damage stack or extend existing ones. And grenade eliminations boost the stacks immediately to now ×5 instead of ×3. Now, they did lower the duration to compensate for the weapon activation. Regardless though, Adrenaline Junkie is looking to be stronger. So if you've got a couple rolls in your vault that have Adrenaline Junkie, don't discard it. Now, a perk that's actually going to get slapped a little bit is actually Vorpal Weapon. Vorpal will now only do 10% extra damage on heavy weapons, but it'll still be 50% on special and actually 20% on primary. Meaning if you have Vorpal on any of your primary weapons, now is the time to get them out. Whirlwind Blade got a big nerf where now it requires stacks to hit a maximum of 10 instead of 5, meaning you have to stay in the fight even longer, thus requiring more light attacks. Pulse Monitor actually got its threshold for activation changed from 90% health to 30% shield. Long story short, Pulse Monitor should be activating with more ease. Will it be meta? Who knows? Which takes us to change number 4, variable ability cooldowns. Listen, this is something Bungie's been hinting at for almost 6-7 months now, but this is that next evolution, that foundational change leading into 3.0 subclasses. But no longer will your grenades or your supers have the same cooldowns regardless of what the ability is. They're going to be separated, meaning a grenade that is weaker, like a Fireball grenade, will have a faster cooldown than, say, a grenade like Flux Grenade, which will now be able to one-hit kill inside of Crucible. These are these variable cooldowns that will allow Bungie to tweak things individually rather than having to deal with these blanket nerfs and buffs that we've seen in the past. And these ability cooldowns also fall in line with our supers. Our supers will now actually have tiers. The higher the tier, the faster the cooldown is for the super. Well, the Radiance is actually at the top. And depending on what happens in the sandbox, those tiers will be subject to change in future sandboxes, which actually takes us to change number 5. This was equally as big as the dynamic ability cooldown changes, as well as the tiers there for our supers, but now in how you get your super back. Passive regeneration overall has been decreased, and super energy will be rewarded based on the amount of participation you have in a gunfight. This is damage given and damage taken. Not only that, primary weapon damage awards the most super energy. This is another way Bungie's really trying to push us to play with our primary weapons. Regardless, this is a huge shakeup, and I actually see a lot of things changing inside of Crucible just due to this. Expect a lot more aggressive play, both in regular 6v6 and in Trials of Osiris. Which takes us to change number 6. Due to those ability cooldown changes, super tiers, and everything else, there's also a long list of exotic armor PvP reworks. Now, I want to point out that most of the changes that we're going over are not necessarily taking effect inside of PvE. So before my PvE players start sharpening their pitchforks, PvE should relatively feel the same. But exotics that are getting changed include things like Frosties, which will no longer stack multiplicatively inside of PvP, with other regeneration buffs. Heart of Inmost Light actually getting an ease of use buff, but its ability energy regeneration scalars have been reduced by 50%. Controversed Hold, duration of grenade regeneration buff is no longer random between 1 and 4 seconds, and is now a fixed duration of 1.75. And they reduce the energy regeneration scalar by 50% inside of PvP. Doomfang Pauldrons reduce super energy gain on activation when an opposing player is killed by a void melee by 50%. Shinobu's Vow reduced grenade energy gain on hit versus player by 66%. Crown of Tempest, grenade melee and super energy regeneration scalar buff, and its duration reduced from 7 seconds to 4 seconds. And the Stag reduced class ability energy refunded on shield break by 50%. I assume there will be even more exotic changes with even more detail in the sandbox patch notes, but this just gives you a little bit of an idea of what we're heading into. Which takes us to change number 6. This actually includes all of the different mods that will be getting a PvP nerf. And these are mods like Melee Kickstart, Grenade Kickstart, Utility Kickstart, Perpetuation, Bolstering Detonation, Focus and Strike, Bomber, Outreach, Dynamo, Distribution, Momentum Transfer, Impact Induction. That entire list will now refund 50% less energy inside of PvP. All of this to curb the amount of ability usage inside of our Crucible games. Now, speaking of other abilities, change number 7. stasis crystal adjustment. And there's actually a lot that goes into this, including shadow dive changes. Stasis crystals now will slow nearby players instead of freezing them. Now, they've increased that slow and freeze radius from 1.75 meters to 2.6 meters, but they reduce crystal detonation damage versus players by a whopping 55%. Now, this has actually been increased inside of PvE by 60%, as well as a detonation radius increase from 6 meters to 8 meters. Long story short, stasis is getting yet another nerf inside of PvP, but a ginormous buff there inside of PvE. Now, for shadow dive, this is supposed to be getting a substantial nerf. Shadow dive will no longer one-hit kill inside of PvP, except in very rare circumstances. And the way they put it in the TWAB, guys, the guardian that you throw your grenade at has to be in the direct center of your grenade, of those crystals, in order to get the one-hit kill. However, its damage inside of PvE has been increased by 100%. No lie, we might start using shadow dive in Grandmasters. Now, since we're on the topic of hunter nerfs, we might as well cover the big one. Change number 8. Hunters, your dodge is getting a nerf. Not only are you getting a longer cooldown, but your dodge will no longer break projectile tracking. Now, if you're a Titan and you're laughing, don't. We got hit too. Change number 9. Shoulder charge will no longer be able to one-hit KO. Now, I wasn't that mad about it because Bungie stated that the overall range of shoulder charge will be increased by over a meter. Its cone width, the target ratio, is also being increased by 10%, and its PvE damage has been increased by 25%, as well as a reduction there in its sprint activation time. I don't know, fellas. Will it be garbage? Potentially. Very likely. But however, there's still the off chance that this change will be received well, or at least for my PvP players. For PvE, it's going to be better, for sure. Which takes us to change number 10. I know my warlocks are laughing. You're like, ha, yeah, hunters and titans are getting nerfed. Oh, no, no, no. Welcome to the club, because you guys got 2 nerfs. Handheld Supernova will no longer be able to one-shot kill players inside of PvP, because there was just so many Nova Warp users. I think Les was the only one that I saw still using Nova Warp. However, they did increase the damage versus champions and bosses by 30%, and they increased the projectile range from 12 meters to 14 meters. And it will actually push targets away on detonation, meaning Handheld Supernova might still have a place inside of PvP. Or you're just gonna push the Guardian away and he'll just shoot you as he's getting pushed away. That's a possibility too. Now, Shadebinder is also gonna be included in that Warlock nerf. Winter's Wrath will now have to freeze and shatter enemy supers twice to get the kill. But to be honest with you, I think that's still gonna be just fine. I think Shadebinder is still gonna be very, very good. It just won't be the instant win button against other supers. There will be some room for counter. Now, change number 11, Destiny is actually leaving the Xbox Game Pass for consoles and cloud gaming. This includes Forsaken, Shadowkeep, and Beyond Light. Players will also lose access to campaign missions, raids, dungeons, hunts, exo challenges, strikes, Trials of Osiris, the Stasis subclasses, the Middle Tree supers for each subclass, the 10% off perk for silver purchases, and other game add-ons. My lord, Destiny Game Pass users, you had a hell of a deal. Now, however, if you've already unlocked certain exotics with that Game Pass, those will still be available. But everything else is gone, man. Which seems kind of weird, right? Like, what are we doing? Renting? Was that like rent? You rent it Beyond Light, Forsaken, and Shadowkeep with Xbox Game Pass? Seems kind of weird, man. If you're an Xbox player, let me know how you feel. Change number 12. You know, we just had to sneak in one more sandbox change here real quick. We're actually getting a full auto mod. Yeah, it's a mod that you can put in your mod slot for your weapons, and you can now fire it in full auto, which is great if you have carpal tunnel, tennis elbow, or whatever. Which brings us to change number 13, which is unrelated. Moments of Triumph will actually be launching this week as well. This includes new emblem, a sparrow, a ghost. There'll also be like a t-shirt for sale, a strange coin, a seal, all that good stuff. There's a lot of you that really gets into the Moments of Triumph, which is cool and all, but change number 14 is what I'm looking forward to, and that's Christmas. The Dawning is set to launch the week after the 30th anniversary event. That is December the 14th, fellas. Grandma Eva's coming, and she's bringing some presents. And I like it, man, because I really get into the festivities. We get some snow at the tower. Stuff starts to feel cold. I'm in Florida right now, so I have to just kind of live vicariously through video games. Sometimes I just sit in Europa. I'm just like, yo, this is so nice. So some snow. Got a blizzard out here. But yes, the dawning coming next week. Change number 15. You will now be able to preview ornaments on all exotic weapons that you got and buy them directly. At this point, guys, you won't even have to go to the Eververse store to see what's in it. It's just gonna be around you, which kind of cracks me up, man. It's like you're on the other side of the universe in this fictional video game. You slay a god and some a-hole shows up and it's like, yo, for like 600 silver, I can make that piece of loot there look even better. And our guardians just go for it. We're like, yeah, okay, that seems like a fair enough deal. Sure. But yes, those ornaments will all be available. You'll be able to visually see it and purchase it right there while inspecting that exotic. Now, change number 16, and this is the last and final change, and this is my plug. A new Twitch bounty emblem will now be available to those that gift subscriptions to any streamer that is playing Destiny 2 and has the extension active. Fellas, we will be streaming day in and day out. So come by our Twitch, check us out. We'll be live. We'll be testing all these changes as well as playing all the new activities and dungeons. Just don't come gift subs right now. Wait until the 30th anniversary event goes live, then gift a sub so you'll at least get an emblem. So guys, those are the big changes coming. Granted, Sandbox patch notes will be dropping on us bright and early tomorrow morning. We'll probably have a video on that. Will it be going over some of the things that were mentioned already in today's video, but in more detail? Yes. We'll have everything timestamped. It'll probably be like an hour-long video. Just warning you, you can watch it while you're going to work, on your way back home, picking your kid up from daycare, while you're getting jiggy with your old lady. Regardless, I'll be there. Fellas and ladies, thank you all for coming and watching. And as always,
slap that like button like your mama told you right.